John Wayne Gacy.
Some viewers may find following views disturbing. Viewer discretion advised.
There are 3 images that jump to mind about John Wayne Gacy, who ranks as one of the worst serial killers in the United States during the 20th century. Smiling clown. A picture of Gacy standing next to Rosalind Carter in 1978, which she autographed, "To John Gacy, best wishes, Rosalind Carter." And finally, when the cops searched his house, they found a 2-foot-long dildo, one of his torture implements, 18 inches of it covered with dried excreta and blood. John Wayne, after the movie star, Gacy was born in 1942 in Edgewater Hospital in Chicago, the only boy in a family with a younger and older sister. In Gacy's family there were not the obvious ruptures so common in the childhood of other serial killers, such as a father who abandons the family or a history of insanity. Gacy's family, for all intents and purposes, was a lot like yours or mine. They lived a middle-class existence in middle-class Chicago. But while Gacy grew up, something terrible was happening between him and his father. His father seemed obsessed with punishing little John, criticizing him, never allowing that his son could do anything right. For years they were at odds, and it was a lifelong regret of Gacy's that he could never please his father. Indeed, Gacy's father died while Gacy was in jail. Gacy couldn't even get permission to attend the funeral. Gacy was an ordinary kind of student in grade school and high school, and he never got into much trouble. His personality, however, developed a couple of noticeable quirks. He was a glad-handing kind of person, with an aggressive style that turned some people off. But his biggest problem was that he was a liar. He was always lying about his accomplishments, as if what he really did do was not good enough. To make himself feel good, he had to exaggerate. He never seemed to notice that many people knew he was lying. Indeed, his tales were often so tall that it would have been impossible for him to have crowded into his life all the things he said he did.
After high school, Gacy briefly attended business school, and then he became a salesman for the Nunn Bush shoe store in Springfield, Illinois. While working there, he met a pretty young woman named Marilyn Myers. They started to date, and he eventually popped the question. He was short, 5 feet 8 inches, and always had a weight problem complete with large belly. He was persuasive and generous and nice to be around. She said yes. They were married in September 1964.
Marilyn's parents bought a string of Kentucky Fried Chicken stores soon after Marilyn and Gacy's wedding, and they wanted the young couple to manage them. They agreed and moved into the elder Myers' home in Waterloo, Iowa. They seemed blessed. Marilyn bore a son and then a daughter. They lived comfortably and worked hard. Gacy also became active in the Waterloo chapter of the JCs, a civic group devoted to bettering their communities with a wide variety of activities. He had first done this in Springfield, achieving quite a lot of success and earning a number of awards from the JCs for his work. Although this sort of life would be more than enough to satisfy most people, Gacy kept lying. He worked hard at the job, 7 days a week until 10 or 11 at night, but he continued his self-aggrandizement. At one point he claimed to be a relative of the person who founded the fried chicken chain. He not only liked to seem important but also liked to look the part. One manifestation of this was his car, which he equipped with a siren and police lights. Later, his more sinister purpose would be revealed. But there were problems. There were some nasty rumors circulating, claiming that Gacy was propositioning and having sex with some of the teenage boys who worked in the restaurants he managed. It was charged that he gave the best-looking boys, he seemed to like light-haired boys with muscled bodies, rides home and favored them in other ways as well.
Then a boy named Mark Miller brought charges against Gacy. Miller said that Gacy had forced him to perform deviant sexual acts with him. Gacy denied it, but an investigation showed that they had been involved with each other and that there were other boys too. One of those boys, James Tullery, detailed a terrifying ordeal in the book The Man Who Killed Boys, by Clifford L. Leindecker. Tullery had been at Gacy's house and, after plying Tullery with booze and pornographic films, Gacy had tried to force him to perform sexual acts. To do this, Gacy had threatened Tullery, cut him with a knife, shackled him, and choked him almost to the point of unconsciousness. Nothing happened, and Gacy released the boy. He was lucky to get out alive.
The judge in Miller's case, mindful of Gacy's perverse patterns, sentenced him to 10 years at the Iowa State Reformatory at Atamosa. At the tender age of 26, John Wayne Gacy was in jail. Marilyn filed divorce papers soon after, and ultimately he was to lose her, the house, and his 2 kids. That didn't seem to matter too much to him, however, because he apparently never contacted her or the kids again. Gacy brought the same verve and vigor to the prison world that he brought to his fried chicken restaurants, and prison officials regarded him highly. After only 8 months, he received parole. Freed, he moved into a house in Chicago with his 61-year-old mother and his sister and got a job as a fast food cook. He then asked the Iowa Parole Board for permission to move to Chicago. Because of his seemingly stable life, including a job, the board granted his request. He moved around as a cook but was doing well for himself, so well that he decided to buy a house.
With the help of his mother, who provided half the financing, he bought a small 2-bedroom ranch at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue in Norwood, a middle-class suburban community not far from the northwest side of Chicago.
The house was on a one-way westbound street and did not get a great deal of traffic. Most of the people traveling down it were heading home. It was a typical suburban brick house, with a garage in front and backyards. The most significant feature of the house, as it turned out, was the crawl space underneath. It had 4-feet-high concrete walls and a dirt floor, and to gain access to it there was a trapdoor on the floor of the bedroom closet. John Wayne Gacy passed through that trapdoor many times.
Gacy made friends with his neighbors at the new house, particularly the Grexa family directly next door, which had 6 children. They noticed that he was always working around the house. He seemed to like that type of work very much.
Gacy didn't stay a bachelor for too long.
On June 1, 1972, he married Carol Hoff, a divorcee with 2 kids, and settled into a suburban life at his home on Somerdale.
In 1974, Gacy formed PDM Contractors. The letters stood for painting, decorating, and maintenance, and started remodeling commercial properties. But all was not blissful at home. Soon his relationship with his wife had deteriorated to the point that she filed for divorce. Later she was to explain that he was sexually impotent and had a quick, dangerous temper. One minute he would be cool, calm, and collected, and the next he would be in a rage and breaking furniture. Gacy had also told his wife a minor detail about himself. He said he liked boys as well as women. While unsuccessful in marriage, however, Gacy's contracting business was doing quite well. He worked extremely hard, finishing jobs early and making sure customers were satisfied. His work crews consisted of 2 kinds of people: experienced older craftsmen and teenage boys as laborers. He often invited the better-looking boys home to watch stag films, where they could drink and smoke marijuana. From time to time Gacy had brushes with the law, but no convictions ever came of them. One boy complained to the police that Gacy had ordered him into his car one night saying that he was a deputy sheriff, and then had forced him to perform oral sex. After Gacy demanded that the boy fellathe him again, the boy refused and jumped out of the car. Gacy tried to run him down, but he escaped. Luckily for Gacy, Iowa parole authorities didn't find out, and soon he didn't have to worry. On June 18, 1976, his parole from the Iowa prison was up and he could not be brought up on parole violation charges. Gacy was too old to work for the JCs in Chicago, but he was not too old for politics. He got himself involved in local politics, ingratiating himself with politicos by providing the services of PDM free of charge. Perhaps the high point of his political achievements was when he posed with Rosalind Carter. At one point after Gacy moved on to Somerdale, his neighbors, the Grexes, noticed an objectionable odor around his house that never really left during all the time Gacy lived there. It was a thick, foul smell. When they asked about it, Gacy said it was probably something wrong with the sewer lines. Because the Grexes had also had trouble with their sewer lines, they didn't pursue it. The smell, of course, was not sewage. From time to time, Gacy would kill a young man, then carry his body through the trapdoor in the closet and bury it in a shallow grave. He hastened decomposition by covering the bodies with lime. Later, investigation would reveal that Gacy trapped his victims in a variety of ways. One method was by posing as a police officer, as he did with the previously mentioned young man. He had purchased a black 1978 Oldsmobile Delta equipped with a searchlight on the side, and he would often cruise the gay neighborhoods of Chicago. Young men, particularly young gay men, felt they could not say no to a police officer and would obediently get in. Or he would simply pick up street hustlers and pay for sex, and sometimes kill them. The most dangerous situation for anyone to be in with John Wayne Gacy was at his home. He had a couple of ways to trap young men there. One was chloroform. He would catch the person off guard and hold a chloroform-soaked rag to his nose until he collapsed. Once the boy was incapacitated, Gacy would cuff the victim.
Another way he got them was the handcuff trick. Gacy would produce what he said were toy handcuffs and challenge the person to put them on and escape. Of course, they were real handcuffs and his victim couldn't escape, and then Gacy would rape and torture and perhaps kill him.
In retrospect, it is amazing that Gacy wasn't caught before he was. Young boys were disappearing at an alarming rate, and Gacy's name even came up in various investigations at different police stations. However, there was often no communication between different police jurisdictions, and none of them thought to see whether he had a criminal record. If they had, they would have discovered his conviction in Iowa for sodomy and might have saved many lives. It is amazing, too, that none of the neighbors suspected anything. One woman living in a home a block away said she would occasionally hear faint screams coming from the house in the dead of night, but neither she nor anyone else did anything about it. And of course, there was that sickening odor that never really went away. It took the murder of Robert Piest, and the determination and skill of one police officer, to derail Gacy's murderous train. Robert Piest was a 16-year-old, all-American high school boy who, in December 1978, was working in a Nissan pharmacy in Des Plaines, Illinois, for $2.85 an hour. His mother came to pick him up one night at 9 o'clock, and Robert asked her to wait in the store while he talked with a contractor about a job that would pay him $5 an hour for the summer. Piest was saving to buy a car, and the job was quite attractive. Piest went out a few minutes after 9 and never returned. When his mother went outside the pharmacy to check on him, she found he had simply vanished. The next day, Lieutenant Joseph Kozenzak was looking over missing person reports and came across that of Piest. He spoke with Piest's mother, ascertained that Piest was not a runaway, and launched a full-scale investigation. One tentacle of the investigation led to Gacy, who denied even having seen the boy. However, unlike other police officers before him, Kozenzak had done a routine background check of Gacy, which included a check for any prior criminal record. The check revealed the Iowa sodomy conviction and prison sentence. Kozenzak convinced a judge that there was probable cause to issue a search warrant, and soon thereafter cops descended on the house at 8213 West Summerdale.
They found pornographic gay films, literature, and other material. And in the trunk of his car, the black Oldsmobile, they found hair that matched that of Robert Piest.
The hair found was not sufficient for an arrest, so police started open surveillance on Gacy that drove him crazy. Then came another break. Police had taken a roll of film from Gacy's house during their search, and when they developed it, they discovered that it belonged to Robert Piest.
Kozenzak was sure that Gacy was his man. And when one of his investigators entered Gacy's house with a second search warrant, he got lucky. Before he was a police officer, the detective had long worked in a place where the smell in Gacy's house was routine, the morgue. The police obtained another warrant and started taking up floorboards and digging into the earth in the crawl space.
The digging took place over a 2-week period, very carefully, as if it were an archaeological dig. When it was over, the police had uncovered 27 bodies and Gacy had confessed to killing another 5, which he had dumped in the Des Plaines River. That was the final resting place of Robert Piest, who was found in the river some months later. An autopsy revealed paper towels jammed in Piest's throat. He had suffocated. It was questioned whether Gacy was mentally fit to stand trial, but Judge Louis B. Garipo determined that he was. A psychologist for the defense testified that Gacy was a paranoid schizophrenic and did not have control over his actions, but that wasn't enough. Gacy was found guilty of the murder of 33 young men and was sentenced to die by lethal injection. He was shipped down to the Menard Correctional Center in Menard, Illinois, where for a time he was the only inmate in the death row cell block. Illinois authorities said they received hundreds of creepy reenactment. The Menard Prison in southern Illinois, about 50 miles south of St. Louis on the Mississippi River, has a panoramic view of the river and surrounding countryside. In fact, it may have the most scenic view of any prison in the Illinois system. Gacy became a portrait painter during his time on death row. His subjects were mostly clowns. He would paint clowns in all kinds of scenes, and he sold them for a handsome price until prison officials cracked down on the practice.
He was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994.